Welcome to our latest podcast, where we're diving into regulation. Today we're joined by Vicky Crichton, our Director of Public Policy. Vicky, would you like to start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Hi Gemma, thanks for speaking to me today. I'm Vicky, I'm the SLCC's Director of Public Policy. I've been with the organisation for around 6 years now, so I've been working on the Regulation of Legal Services Scotland Act since its start, and I'm now looking into how we implement that.
So, we're going to be talking about the Regulation of Legal Services Scotland Act 2025 and what it means for complaints and regulation. But first, why was the new legislation needed?
So both ourselves and the Law Society of Scotland have been calling for changes for more than a decade now. We knew that the legislation was really prescriptive, and that makes the complaints processes that we use much more complex and costly than is really necessary. So we thought that there was an opportunity for more fundamental change to the regulatory system, and that was in line with what we'd seen in other sectors and jurisdictions. But ultimately, government opted for a more incremental approach. But the changes that are in the Act will make some really significant improvements, we think.
So, let's talk about some of those improvements. What does it mean for complaints?
So, as I mentioned, the complaints process is often seen as too complex and too slow. There are lots of individual changes that this legislation makes, and overall, combined, those changes really bring about more flexibility in our process, more opportunities to be proportionate in what we do and how we do it. A really good example of that is that where a complaint comes to us and perhaps the practitioner or the law firm has already offered a fair settlement to the consumer, we won't investigate that complaint further. We'll be able to close it on the basis of that fair settlement. There's also going to be some new powers for the SLCC to initiate complaints itself and to require firms to improve their systems or training where we think that that's necessary and would make an improvement. Other changes include changes to the way that complaints can be reviewed. We'll be setting up an independent internal review committee, and that'll replace the Court of Session appeals that are currently in the system. Those are hugely costly and time consuming for everyone involved. So we think that's a significant improvement, both for helping to make sure the reviews happen swiftly, but also to reduce the cost to the profession that pays for our service. We'll also have greater flexibility about when complaint levies can be charged. And overall, from all of these changes, what we hope people will see is a much more efficient process that helps to resolve their complaints as swiftly as possible.
The SLCC also has a range of powers to oversee parts of the regulatory system. Are those changing?
They are, yes, and that'll build on our existing powers. So, for example, we'll be able to issue guidance and set minimum standards about how conduct and regulatory complaints are investigated by the regulators. We will be able to look at how practitioners handle complaints and any trends that we see in the practices that lead to complaints and think about how to improve that. We'll be able to request information directly from firms about the complaints that they receive, which they keep a log of in their complaint logs. And our independent consumer panel, which already has oversight of some of our work in the complaints system, will have its remit expanded across the whole regulatory system. And there'll be a requirement for us to fund their work through our budget. That means that that independent consumer viewpoint will be brought across the regulatory system and really have an impact on the way that services are delivered.
That's a lot of change. When will those be in place?
It is a lot of change, and there are significant other changes to the wider regulatory system too. There's a few things that need to happen to bring those changes in. We need the Minister to lay some commencement orders in Parliament, and the timescales for that will be affected by the forthcoming election, but we're hoping to see the first of those within the next couple of months. We'll also be speaking to government about funding because these changes will have an impact on the resources that we need to deliver them. We've been meeting with other stakeholders to share information on our plans and to hear from them about their plans to implement the changes that affect their work. And then we need to work through how to implement those changes in practice. It is a lot of change.
So, what does the work to implement those changes look like?
So some of the changes and the decisions about them have already been made by Parliament and hardwired into the legislation. We just need to make sure that they happen. Other changes will need a bit further consideration, and we'll need to get input from our users and stakeholders as we deliver our plans. A good example is in the complaints process, there's always a balance between being thorough and being efficient, even if ideally everyone also always wants us to be both. So being fair to everybody involved seems like a no-brainer until maybe you're weighing up giving an extension to one party in a complaint to help them engage with the process while being mindful of the impact of that delay on others. We need to work through some of those issues to think about what the right approach is. But helpfully, many of the changes were inspired by things our staff told us didn't work in practice, or things that caused unnecessary delays or distress or unexpected or unwanted outcomes for people. We had input into the changes from our consumer panel, who highlighted parts of the system that consumers found the most difficult, or things that undermined their confidence in us, or worse still, things that could put people off complaining in the first place. And that helped to inform some of the changes that we asked government to consider. We also heard from legal services providers about the issues that they found the most challenging and what would help them to better deal with and resolve complaints before they escalated, hopefully before the complaint ever reaches the SLCC. So our job now is to take all of that learning and all of our experience from operating the existing complaints system over the past 18 years and channel all of that into developing it afresh. There's a few things we want to think about along the way. So we want to think about how what we do helps to drive consumer confidence and trust in legal services. That's really important. And when people know there's help available when things go wrong, their confidence in using a service rises. So we'll be listening to consumers to understand their needs and their concerns and the journey that they expect us to take them on when they bring a complaint to us. We're also going to be looking at creating a system that's future-proofed. And that's not just about today's digital world, and it's not just about the increasingly AI-driven tomorrow that we see all around us, but it's also trying to make it work for changes and developments that we don't yet see, things that we don't yet know are coming down the line, trying to make sure that the system is flexible and can deal with those changes as they happen. But I think really one of the most important things is that at the heart of all of this needs to be really good customer service, because that's what people rightfully expect to receive, and it's what our staff want to deliver. For all of the focus on systems and processes in this legislation, what's important is that people feel heard and understood when they bring a complaint to us or when they explain to us why they've already dealt with a complaint. Well, the process that we design needs to make that happen. It needs to help people to be heard and understood, not get in the way of it. Our team spend a lot of time thinking about what good and poor customer service looks like. And we know that poor service often comes at a higher cost in terms of the staff time and the energy needed to put it right, let alone any financial cost. And we know that people tell their friends, their family about good and poor customer service, and that helps to either encourage people or put people off using our service when they need it. It's really important that we design something that works well for people. So we're excited about the challenge to come. We're looking forward to working with consumers and legal services providers and other stakeholders across the sector to help shape a really great complaints process and service, and to ensure that all of our oversight powers work really well in practice.
So how can people find out more as this develops?
So we have a dedicated page now on our website, and that's going to be detailing upcoming changes and what they mean for consumers and legal services providers. We have information up there about some of the early work that's underway, and there's details on there of the consultations, any consultations that we have live that people might want to get involved in or respond to. And if people have any questions, we'd love to hear from them. This is an area of this implementation is new to us. We're thinking through all of the issues, but we'd love to hear from people if they have ideas about how we should be doing that.
So that brings us to the end of today's podcast about the regulation of Legal Services Scotland Act 2025 and what it means for complaints and the wider regulatory system. We've covered why the legislation was introduced, the key improvements it brings to the complaints process, and how the SLCC's oversight role will develop as changes come in. There's still a lot of work ahead as commencement dates are set and implementation begins, and we'll continue to share updates as things move forward. If you'd like to stay informed, visit the dedicated website where we'll be posting the latest information, and follow us on our social media channels. And if you have any questions, we'd be really happy to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and thanks again to Vicky for joining us.